As Russell's just introduced me, I'm the Vice President of the Australia-China Business Council, which, if it's unknown to you, is a national organisation that works to promote strong trade and investment links between Australia and China. But it recognises the importance of establishing sound relationships between the two countries, not only in economic terms, but the wider social and cultural terms as well. The ACBC's aim is to facilitate the commercial interests of its members doing business with China and to represent the views to Australian and Chinese policy and decision makers. And I would like to reiterate Michael's point of the usefulness of the Council for education providers. We have about a 10% makeup of education providers at the moment, but we look forward to more to beat that dead hand of government. Now, in a recent address to the ACBC, the new Chinese Consul General to Queensland, Dr. Sun Dali, impressed us very much with his homework. He was aware that University of Queensland had recently made it into the top 1% at number 86 of the academic ranking of world universities, the Shanghai Jiaotong Index, and he was also aware that at least a quarter of their international student body was from China, that both Griffith and the Queensland Universities of Technology were among the top 500 of the Shanghai Jiaotong Index. So he thought that cooperation in the area of education was very fruitful, and he thought that there was but he spoke in terms of win-win development opportunities. He also spoke in terms of mutual trust and a long-term strategic partnership. He then introduced a rather sobering comment around the fact that we had to be mindful of economies of scale. And by this he meant that we had to be aware and considerate of the fact that the per capita GDP in China was only 1/9 of that of Australia. And that if we were to go down this path, we needed to understand that a reasonable price will bring profits and an unreasonable price could make us lose. I'm pondering Dr. Sun's comments. It seemed to me that this was a reflection on the importance of the long-term strategic approach to this partnership. He said that we couldn't understand the relationship in the simple buyer-seller terms, that we needed to understand it in a much broader collaborative context. And that comment has been reiterated a few times today, where we have been advised that education in China is not a commodity but a public good, and that the importance of education in relation to China regarding the one-child policy makes it even more important. And so reasonableness around a price takes on a whole different concept, I think, to a Chinese family wanting to educate their children or child than it does to us. And I think that we need to understand where China is coming from. And I've called this the education evolution. And we need to understand where education is, or how education is evolving in China in the context that we've heard today, the change in growth development, their focus on consumer-driven growth or domestic consumption, the focus in terms of the service sector, and also education as part of that. So where do we, taking a step back, where are we? The figures at the moment, we've, I think, settled on 130,000 Chinese students onshore in Australia, which represents about a quarter of our export earnings. This enrolments for China are down at the end of June 2011 by 3%. This is reflected in a higher education being up 9% and all other sectors down. But commencements from China are down 9% at the end of June 2011. And we've talked about various factors regarding this in terms of changes to visa requirements, the Australian dollar, increased competition from the US and the UK, Canada and China itself, and I'll come to that. But there's also been, and it's been mentioned in our earlier session, an interesting growth in offshore commencements. This is being driven by China. It's in the public vet sector, and it has been driving the growth in that sector since about 2006. In our session, Jen gave a fantastic overview of a lot of what's going on in terms of education in China, and so I'm not going to go into that too much. What I wanted to talk about were what do we need to look at to understand where education is evolving in China and how those opportunities are then made effective for us. I think there are two very important documents that we can look at. The one is the 12th year plan, where we've seen a lot of the economic drivers being spelled out. The focus on the service economy, the focus on sustainable growth, the focus on clean energy, I think are all really important indicators. But one of the critical indicators, I think, is the focus on science and development, and where the Chinese and how the Chinese political leadership understand that, and the importance of that theme in, and I'm quoting from the 12th year plan, the translation thereof, accelerating transformation of the pattern of economic development as the main thread. We need to deepen reform and opening up. So there's been a very clear, this comes with an indication that they will be increasing their spend on R&D from currently it's 1.7% of GDP. It will be up as far as 2.2% in 2015. Quoting Premier Wen Jiabao, China cannot develop without developing science and technology, he said in late May. Our future relies on the future of science and technology. Last year, 108 billion, or 698 RMB, was allocated to research and development in what some are now terming a form of techno-nationalism. Over the last 2 years, China's spending on R&D has averaged 20% plus growth, which is really phenomenal in R&D terms. R&D is underpinned by education, quite simply. When we look at the phenomenal growth in this sector, the number of engineers, the number of joint or research institutes, the infrastructure is quite formidable. One of the roles that I've had in the past 8 years has been to develop international research collaborations in science and technology, and our major partner has been China, and that's on behalf of the Queensland Government, I should add. So we've been working with Queensland institutes and universities to facilitate, giving a government framework around the relationship through the use of very effective memorandums of understanding, which have been focusing on global issues and issues that pertain in particular to the development in China, which impact on us all regionally, of course. And you can pick them: clean energy, climate change, water, and sustainable agriculture. Now, those MOUs aren't MOUs that sat on the shelf. They were MOUs that were used or strategically used to identify key partners in China for both government researchers and also for researchers in the higher education sector. And I see no reason why they can't be applied and used by the entire education sector. We use them to identify the holders of money or funds, the relationship brokers, and in particular in Beijing, in the Chinese Academy of Sciences, which is their premier science administrative body, similar to our CSIRO, I guess. But we've linked in very closely with the Bureau of International Cooperation